What's the creepiest thing you've seen other families do that they accept? I went to elementary school with this really nice girl. She was the eldest of 4 girls, all perfectly healthy and beautiful. Kids are laughing at her because she was smelling really bad. I talked to her about it, and she told me that her mother makes her wear the same cloths for a week before washing them. Her mother was really busy praying to have a son. She was in the church at 6 a.m. every morning and spent a lot of time there, always praying to have a son. Well, the miracle happened and she had a son. That's all they could talk about. It was like Jesus himself was reborn. It was weird. Maybe 2 to 3 ago, I saw her in the bus. The first thing she told me, after not seeing each other for maybe 30 years, was, "Did you know I have a brother?" I was speechless.
That's an interesting story. It's funny how life brings us back to people we knew so long ago. It sounds like she really had a tough time growing up with that situation. The focus shifting completely to her brother after all those years must have felt strange for you. Sometimes, it's surprising to see how family dynamics can play out. People change, but memories stick around.
Definitely has to be my neighbors when I was younger. I hung out and played with these 3 siblings. They were all pretty normal kids, but the moms seemed kind of clingy. During the summer, we would play outside a lot. Baseball, hockey, go-karts, swimming, the norm. Every single day at about 12, the mom would call the kids back to the house, one at a time. They would have to go inside for about a half hour, then come out and the next kid would go in. Never thought too much about it, until one day I was actually in their house with them and found out why she called them. She had mandatory cuddle time with each of the kids. They would lay on the couch, and she would spoon them in the quiet for about 30 minutes each. Weirdest thing I've ever encountered. Edit, no, her name was not Beverly Goldberg.
That's an interesting story. Kids just want to play, and that situation seems pretty out of the ordinary. The whole mandatory cuddle time thing sounds like it was a bit much. I guess every family has their quirks, but that one feels a little too intense. It's funny how we only realize these things later on. Sometimes we just accept what we see as kids without questioning it too much.
There was a weird kid in my neighborhood named Neil. He had a club foot. That's not what was weird, it's just sort of memorable. Anyway, we were invited to his birthday party down the street. His parents sent invites that we were to bring a present and $10 to cover the costs of hosting the party. My mom was annoyed and confused, but sent us with the presents and the money. We had to give the money to Neil's parents before they let us in the house. We were each given 1 water balloon to throw and exactly 1 slice of cake. Then we gave this kid his present and his parents sent everybody home after maybe half an hour.
That sounds like a strange party. I remember one time going to a friend's birthday where they charged us too. It felt off though, like we were just guests paying for a service. I got 1 slice of cake too, and it felt rushed. It's funny how some kids' parties can be more about the parents than the actual kid. I guess not all birthday memories are super fun.
Went to a friend's house when I was 17. She asked her mom for a snack, and her mom brought out a huge raw white onion completely slathered in mayo on a plate, and she and my friend just went at it with their forks like it was filet mignon. 3 years later, and I still think about that shit from time to time.
That's definitely a memorable snack choice. I can't imagine going for a raw onion like that. It's weird how some moments stick with you. I mean, who thinks to eat an onion like a fancy meal? But it seems like they were enjoying it. Sometimes the oddest experiences with friends leave the biggest impressions. Sure makes you glad for the normal snacks we have.
I have an ex whose family would literally burn any meat they cooked for dinner. Chicken, fish, steak, all completely burned. They were terrified about bacteria on their food. I got them to cook my steak medium well, less burned, but still above well. Once, but I got some serious looks of disgust. The mother also forced me to draft a living will and instructed me on the proper way to seal a room to protect from a very likely chemical attack with duct tape and plastic sheeting.
That's a wild story. Cooking meat to a crisp is one thing, but drafting a living will and prepping for chemical attacks is on another level. It's strange how some families have their own protocols for everything. I guess they had their reasons, but it sounds pretty intense. You definitely had an interesting experience with them. It's always good to be safe, but that seems like a bit much.
I was about 7 to 8. I used to play with this girl that lived a few houses down and across the street. I live in a cookie-cutter, very safe and fairly decent neighborhood, across the street from the high school. Her mother never let us play outside because there could be a drive-by. Any car we see driving by could be someone with a gun and could very easily shoot us and kill us. She never let us play in the living room, near the windows, either for that same reason. Another time I was over there playing with my friend, and the mom pulled me aside. She pointed to a truck she saw parked outside my house on the curb, my uncle's truck. She told me that it's actually probably a burglar, and he was inside my house and killing my family at that moment. She wouldn't let me go home, either for the fear of me also getting killed. She finally let me go home after my mom called later and requested I come home for dinner. That family is still crazy, even 13 years later.
That's a wild story. It's strange how some parents can be really overprotective for no good reason. I mean, it's just kids trying to play. It's kind of funny now to think about how paranoia can shape a kid's experience. The girl probably had no idea what was going on in her mom's head. It's a shame when fear gets in the way of just enjoying childhood.
I went to a friend's house, and we put some cartoons on. While we were watching, I asked him a question, but he didn't respond. He was fixated on the TV, absolutely glued. His childminder just laughed. Oh, he'll be like that all evening now. So I just had to wait for my parents to pick me up whilst he unflinchingly watched TV for hours.
I get that. There are moments when you just get lost in something, especially cartoons. Time seems to slip away, and everything else fades out. It's wild how a show can pull you in so completely you forget the world around you. I remember similar times too, just stuck in front of the TV without a care. Just a simple evening that feels nothing and everything at the same time.
There was a family of girls I went to church with, and none of them were allowed to cut their hair. They had to wait until they were 16 so they wouldn't get a haircut they'd regret because the mother had. They also weren't allowed to talk at the dinner table. One time, one of the daughters was laughing at something and coughed on her food. The mom was afraid of one of them choking and dying, so talking was banned. No one told me that when I came over for dinner. I just talked and they all stared at me.
That's a pretty wild situation. Can't imagine being at a dinner where no one talks. It's awkward for sure. You must have felt like the odd one out. And the whole hair thing is interesting too. Waiting until 16 just seems like a lot. I guess they just had strict rules. It's kind of sad they couldn't relax and be themselves around the dinner table.
I used to go over to this kid, Neil's house when I was in 4th or 5th grade. His entire family, including Neil, would sometimes leave and go run errands, leaving me alone there. They also would tell my parents that I was invited for dinner, but then leave me in the basement to play video games by myself while they all ate. I never complained because Sega Genesis.
That sounds pretty familiar. I had a friend like Neil once. We'd hang out, but sometimes his family would just disappear. I'd be left alone with games while they did family stuff. At the time, I didn't mind. Just me and the console. Good memories, really, even if it felt a bit weird. Gave me a lot of time to get good at those games without anyone bothering me. Simple times.
I knew a girl in high school who had parents who were obsessed with dinner plates. They had such a huge collection of collectible plates in their house that every room was full of them on display. Their entire house was basically a library set up for these things. Her bedroom was a mattress on the floor, surrounded by display cases of plates. You couldn't even lean on any wall, they were all like this. The last time I went over there, I knocked one off the wall by mistake. I caught it, and it didn't even break, but my god, the rage her dad flew in was fucking horrifying. He was inches away from punching me. Never went back. They tried to nervously laugh it off like, haha, good old dad, being funny, ha ha ha. The one time I asked my friend why they had so many, she went on a passionate tangent about all the cool plates they had and why they were so awesome. It went on for an hour. I never asked again because hearing about neat dishware for an hour was like torture. Edit. I'll just look her up on Facebook. She works now as a Tupperware consultant. Seriously.
That's a wild story. Collectible plates as a passion sounds intense. Can't imagine having a house set up like that, especially with the stakes so high. Knocking one off the wall must have felt like a slow-motion scene. The dad's reaction sounds over the top. And your friend getting so excited about plates for an hour? That's a level of dedication I can't relate to. Tupperware consultant feels like a fitting career choice, though.
My sister dated this guy in high school for a couple years. He had the biggest helicopter parents in the world. He would call to see if my sister was around, and then his whole family would show up. Mom, dad, and sister would be with him. It was almost like they were going somewhere and dropping him off, except they would come inside and crash in the living room for hours while they waited on him. I felt so bad for the kid cause he was 17 to 18 years old, and his parents would third wheel him everywhere.
That's a pretty unique situation. Having your whole family tag along on dates can't be easy. I can imagine how awkward that must have been for your sister and him. Poor kid probably wanted some space and independence. It's tough when parents just don't get it. Guess he couldn't really have a normal teenage relationship with them around all the time. Definitely memorable though.
A friend from high school theater used to invite me over to her family's house all the time. Her mom collected large vintage dolls, like child-sized ballerinas, Victorian girls, and this one overly happy clown. They'd dress it up in their own clothing and place it around the house, like it was a family joke that it was alive. They also collected and played didgeridoos as a family group. It sounds cool, but they were all pretty odd individuals.
That sounds pretty interesting. I remember my friend had a thing for quirky collections too. He had this room filled with old toys and weird art. It was like stepping into another world. Not as strange as the dolls, but still unique. We'd spend hours just goofing around and making fun of each piece. Good times. Always felt like there was something off, but in a fun way.
I went on a road trip with a friend's family one time. It was a 5-hour drive, and the entire time, no one spoke. It was completely silent. No music, no talking, nothing. And even though they had drank tons of liquids before getting in the car, no one had to pee during that 5-hour drive. Weirdest and most unsettling drive of my life.
That sounds like a strange experience. A long drive with no conversation can feel pretty awkward. It's even weirder that nobody needed to take a break. I've had moments of silence during trips, but usually, someone cracks a joke or puts on music. So, a 5-hour silent ride is a totally different vibe. I guess some trips are just quiet ones.
Something that I have witnessed for years only began to hit me as the realization slowly unfolded. A family that I visited frequently with all adult children who still live with their parents would coincidentally always have the same exact movie on every single time I visited. They all huddle around as though they are only watching it for the first time. Once when I actually stayed over for a longer duration, when the movie finally ended, the TV was finally turned off only to be turned on again, and the play button was then pressed for the same movie. I finally realized that this movie is watched multiple times a day, every single day, almost like a ritual, and all the members of the family react the same way to the same scene repeatedly, as if they have never seen it before. Edit for all those asking what movie, it was called Just Ask My Children.
It's interesting how some families have their routines. I had a friend whose family did something similar. They'd gather every weekend and watch The Sandlot, like it was new, even though they had seen it countless times. They all laughed at the same jokes and yelled at the same scenes. It became their thing, a way to bond. Sometimes comfort comes from those little rituals, even if they seem odd to outsiders.
I went on vacation with my buddy when we were kids. They weren't religious, but before every meal, they would all say the same chant about being a better person and try your best. It was really creepy because they would all say it in the same monotone voice. It turned out the mom was just tired of everyone eating before she got to the table, so she made up the tradition.
That's kind of funny. It's wild how something that seemed all serious was just a way to keep everyone in check. I can imagine how awkward that felt, especially as a kid. It's like they were all in on a joke and you were just trying to figure it out. At least they were aiming for positivity, even if it came off a bit odd. Just shows how a simple setting can have weird traditions.
I knew a guy who was the oldest of 12 children. He was 20 at the time. He told me that a few months after his mom would have a baby, his parents would go on a hotel date. And when they did, all the kids would get excited and talk to each other about if he's going to get her pregnant. And then they would all bug the mom about it until a few weeks later when she would announce she was pregnant and all the kids would be so excited about it.
That's an interesting dynamic for a big family. It must have been quite the atmosphere when a new sibling was on the way. I can imagine the excitement building up and how the kids would speculate about it. With that many siblings, every new baby probably felt like a big event. It's kind of cool how they all got involved in that anticipation together.
I had a close childhood friend whose mom insisted that we treat their dogs like people. Whenever I went round there, I had to greet these two Cocker Spaniels, say goodbye to them when I left, say excuse me if I walked past one of the dogs in the hallways. Stuff like that. Sometimes we'd be eating dinner and having a conversation, and the mom would try to include the dogs by asking their opinions, and we'd all sit there in silence like idiots until she decided they'd had enough time to reply, which they never did, being dogs. There was other stuff with those dogs, but I don't really want to relive it right now. Not the weirdest thing ever, but weird enough.
That's pretty unique. I remember a friend back then who also treated their pets like family. It was always a bit awkward. They'd set places at the dinner table for their cats, and we'd talk about our day while the cats just stared at us. It felt normal for them, but I couldn't help but chuckle inside. It's funny how some people really bond with their pets like that.
An old friend's mom was completely paranoid that Al-Qaeda would storm the small British town they lived in. Her solution? Have a massive bomb shelter built under their house. Not the weird part, though. About 5 times a year, she would spend literally thousands and thousands of pounds on groceries to stock the shelter with. By this, I mean she would genuinely buy out the whole supermarket. It would take her about 20 trips over a week. Not just canned food, but perishables too. I only found this out by sleeping over on one of her shopping days, where food covered literally every single surface of their massive house. My friend just shrugged it off and was, oh yeah, just restocking our bomb shelter. We always need to be ready for invasion. The faki?
That's a wild situation. I can't imagine seeing that much food packed everywhere. Your friend's mom sounds like she took preparation to another level. It's funny how some people have these intense fears and develop their own ways to cope. Your friend's casual attitude about the whole bomb shelter thing is kind of hilarious, though. Just shows how normal it is for them. Still, buying out a supermarket sounds like a lot of work.
My family was that weird family. From like 3 to 7, I would only wear my underwear when I was home. I felt free and comfortable that way. So as soon as I get home from anywhere, I'd strip down to my panties, and it didn't matter who was at our house, be it my friends, my siblings' friends, relatives, or friends of my parent. My family acted like it was completely normal. I'm sure people thought we were weird as hell.
That sounds like an interesting childhood experience. Growing up in a household where norms felt different can really shape your view on comfort and freedom. I can imagine how that might have confused some visitors. It's funny to think about how what feels normal to one family can seem really odd to outsiders. At least you felt at ease in your own space. Sometimes that's all that really matters.
When we were in high school, my best friend's dad did some seriously creep stuff. When we were 13, he gave her a large diamond engagement ring and told her she was forbidden to get married until she found a man who could buy her a nicer one. WTH? We were 13. We didn't want to marry anyone. We spent most of our time playing N64 and riding bikes. When everyone started dating, she wasn't allowed. Finally, she was very excited and said her dad had had a vision from God that she was allowed to date now. I'm religious, so I'm not knocking religion, but dude, that didn't happen. Came to a school dance and pinned the boy she was dancing with against the wall. Police were called. Dad was banned from school campus and all school functions, even graduation. Her mom never said a word that I heard. My friend was embarrassed by it, but more in a OMG dads, LOL way rather than a WTH, this is creepy as shit way. She had 2 brothers, and they were allowed to do whatever they wanted.
That sounds pretty wild. It's strange how some parents can be so protective, especially over things like dating. I guess your friend just rolled with it, even when things got kind of extreme. It's odd seeing that kind of favoritism, too. I wonder how it shaped her views on relationships later on. Sometimes, you just gotta laugh at the craziness of it all, even if it's a bit off.
My neighbors don't let their kids have any condiments on their food. No ketchup on a hot dog or burger. No mayo on sandwiches. When I asked why, the wife went on this rant about how kids don't get choices and they can have ketchup when they move out of the fucking house and get a job. The really odd part is this is literally the only thing withheld from them. The kids have boxes and bikes and toys and nice clothes and everything else they could want in the world, but they gotta eat their hamburgers dry.
That's a strange approach to parenting. I mean, sure, it's good to set limits, but over something like condiments? It's funny how they can have all these toys and gadgets, but can't enjoy a simple hot dog the way they like it. Life's too short to skip ketchup, you know? It makes you wonder what other quirky rules they have at home. Kids must be pretty confused about choices.
The act itself isn't creepy, but I was very creeped out until I realized what was happening. I was at my SO's house, and her mom was cooking and said, "I think it's about that time." Immediately, the entire family, mom, dad, and 6 siblings, started simultaneously mumbling something I couldn't understand. After they finished and saw the look on my face, my SO said they just said grace, but everybody is in a rush to eat, which is why I couldn't hear what they were saying. I thought they were going to sacrifice me.
That's a wild experience. It's always weird being part of someone's family traditions, especially when they suddenly start mumbling like that. I can see how you jump to some wild conclusions when you're not used to it. Once you found out they were just saying grace, though, I bet it was a relief. Still, the vibe must have been pretty tense for a moment. Families can be a bit intense with their rituals.
Not drinking anything with dinner. They would have dinner, then after dinner someone would bring out a pitcher of water and glasses, and they'd sit around the table, all drink their glasses of water without talking, put them down, and walk away. Edit. Well, dang, now I know why so many people are chronically dehydrated.
That's weird, right? Just sitting there in silence after dinner, drinking water like it's some kind of ritual. You'd think they'd want to chat or something. Honestly, that probably messes with how people stay hydrated. Makes you realize how little we think about these small habits, like just having a drink while hanging out. It's a simple thing, but it feels a bit off.
I had a friend whose family would never close, let alone lock the door even when taking a shit. So he'd be curling one out and his parents would come in and brush their teeth or whatever, as if it was normal. I burst in on his mother having a piss one time, and she just said, "Won't be a minute." What? Edit. I get that some families do this. It's just odd to me that they would carry on even when there are guests in the house.
That's a pretty wild situation. I've heard of families being super relaxed about that stuff, but it's still strange. I mean, imagine just walking in on someone doing their business like it's no big deal. Your friend probably got used to it, but as a guest, it's a whole other level of awkward. Definitely not something you expect when visiting someone else's house.
The father would walk around in his underwear after work. As in, you couldn't come to the house and ring the doorbell because the dad would be pulling a Breaking Bad and be in underpants only. They were a weird kind of super religious where you couldn't sing, "It's raining, it's pouring, the old man is snoring," because they thought it insulted God. I was quite young when we were friends with their kids, so finding out the underwear thing was really bizarre for me. No one in my house did that.
That's a pretty strange scene for sure. I mean, seeing someone's dad casually strolling around in his underwear would mess with your head a bit. And the whole not singing certain songs because of their beliefs just adds to the weirdness. It's kind of funny how different families can be. I guess we're all shaped by these little oddities, and that one sticks in your mind. Not something you see every day.
I worked at Pizza Hut for years, and there was this one family that would the exact same thing time they came in. It would not be weird, but they would dine in every day, sometimes twice a day. They would order a Hawaiian stuffed crust pizza, cinnamon sticks, and Mountain Dew every single time. It at times honestly felt like I was living through Groundhog Day. The kicker is they came in so much that their daughter named their black cat after me. I'm black.
That's pretty wild. I can imagine that routine getting old fast. Eating the same thing every day isn't for everyone, but I guess it worked for them. It's kind of funny they named their cat after you, though. Shows how much they liked you or maybe the service you provided. Takes a special kind of dedication to be that consistent at a pizza place.
I'm seeing a lot of overly affectionate families here, but my buddy gets to me with his lack of affection. Rather than mom or dad or something similar, he refers to his parents on a first-name basis. It's Doug and Karen. When asked why, he looks at me like I'm a crazy person and responds, "Those are their names." I don't know why it threw me off so hard.
I get that. Sometimes, how people relate to their family can be pretty different. My friend was similar, calling his parents by their first names. It felt strange, like he was keeping some sort of distance. He never seemed bothered by it, though. Just part of how he grew up, I guess. Makes you think about how family dynamics shape us in unexpected ways.
I'm willing to out myself and my family. One day, my then girlfriend, now wife, witnessed us putting sliced cheese on our donuts. Her face was disgusted. I was not aware other people don't do that until that moment. Also, it's delicious, so save your protests. Edit. Since everyone asked, just a regular glazed Krispy Kreme donut and a slice of American cheese. Now for the twist, the cheese is cold.
I can relate to that. A friend of mine had a weird habit of dipping fries in ice cream. We all thought it was gross at first, but after trying it, I actually didn't mind it. Everyone has different likes and dislikes, I guess. It's funny how things we think are normal can surprise others. Food is just one of those areas where people get really passionate about their preferences.
I'm told it is a little disconcerting at first, but people warm up to my very mixed family. Here is the background. Both of my parents have divorced parents that never spoke to each other and never wanted to be like that when they divorced. So we have large family get-togethers where all my siblings and all my step-siblings hang out with my mom, dad, stepdad, and stepmom. This includes international vacations, various birthday parties, and Valentine's Day. We just all get along, and we are from small town. It's especially helpful because last year my stepmom was paralyzed from the chest down, and my mom helps take care of her.
That sounds like a pretty unique situation. Having such a large family, especially with all the different dynamics, must make for interesting gatherings. It's cool that everyone gets along, even after the whole divorce thing. The support your mom gives to your stepmom is nice to hear. It's refreshing to see people come together like that in tough times. Family can be complicated, but it sounds like you've found a way to make it work.
I went to elementary school with this girl, and every year she would have a big sleepover with all the girls in the class, only about 10 girls. It was a small school. Anyways, her parents believed in an early bedtime, which isn't crazy. However, they also were super paranoid about robbers and had the most intense security system I've ever seen. This system was very sensitive, and her parents would turn it on after everyone got into their sleeping bags. You were not allowed to get up during the night. You couldn't even roll around without setting the thing off. They would send people to bed at 7 p.m. and expect all the kids to be silent and still until the morning. Every year someone would move, the alarm would blare, and the dad would run downstairs with his shotgun while the mom called the cops. Every single year.
That sounds pretty wild. I get the whole early bedtime thing, but that level of security for a sleepover seems overboard. Can't imagine trying to stay still all night with that setup. Must have been nerve-wracking when the alarm went off. Got a feel for those parents too. It sounds like every year was a real scene. But hey, at least you have some memorable stories from those sleepovers.
In my first few weeks of high school, I made a new friend who quickly invited me to his house. He and his family were extremely down-to-earth, normal people it seemed. When we sat down at the table, I don't remember the finer details of the meal, but after a while I noticed my friend and his younger brother licking every last crumb and bit of sauce from the plate. Nothing out of the ordinary, I thought. Long day, I supposed. This was until an hour later, when his mother brought my dirty plate into his room and demanded to know who hadn't licked their plate clean. My friend nervously pointed at me. She was furious and asked how the next person was supposed to eat from it if I had not licked it clean. She left the room. Surely what I was thinking couldn't be true. I asked my friend if they actually washed their plates, and he replied, of course. We use our tongues, so the next person can use it. Needless to say, I never returned to that house.
That's an interesting story. It's funny how you can be thrown off by what other families consider normal. I mean, licking a plate is one thing, but being called out for not participating is another. It's a bit awkward to navigate those social norms. Definitely makes you rethink future invites. I can see why you wouldn't want to go back there. Sometimes, it's just better to say no thanks and move on.
Not that creepy, but my ex-boyfriend used to call his mom whenever he was stressed so that she could assure him that everything would be okay. He used to send her messages like, "Is everything going to be okay, Mom?" And she'd reply with, "Don't worry, you'll be okay." He was 28 at the time. He also gave her all his passwords so she could access his bank accounts and take care of his finances. And he got sent to a really cool destination for work for 2 weeks and spent the entire time moping about how much he missed his family. I love my parents and all, but come on.
That's a different take on adulting. It's interesting how some people lean on their parents for comfort, even in their late 20s. I've seen friends struggle with that too, but usually they try to handle things themselves. It's great to have family support, but there's a limit, right? I guess everyone's got their own way to deal with stress. Some just cling a bit more.
Please consider subscribing if you enjoyed. Love.